me to wait for him while he's in the bathroom. I'll be on time. So, we were just speaking about what class are we actually on. So this is, tonight we're doing a review of the course on Vinaya. This is course number, we said 9, didn't we? So
course 17, class 9.
Yeah, we finished, I don't know, 150 classes or something like that. And these are the people who made it to the end. And so now we're doing a review of everything at a top level. So it's not about 150 classes, isn't it? Yeah, something like that. Kind of amazing.
15 times 11.
Yeah. So tonight and next week we're going to review the material we originally covered in depth for Vinaya, Buddhist discipline. Okay. So we'll begin with a little bit of meditation, a few prayers. We set our motivation in the beginning of class. So my children in the back who didn't make it home tonight. Hey Deva.
Yes.
We're going to meditate now, so can you guys be quiet for a while?
Okay.
Thank you. Alright, so meditate. So in the beginning of class, we begin by setting our motivation, and we do a few prayers in Tibetan. And the basic idea is to recollect what we're doing and to set our intention and to connect with the lineage and teaching lineage and to basically to offer a prayer of thanksgiving and request to all of the holy beings of the past who have passed this lineage on for so many centuries.
Sashi Bhuki Jishin Metotram Nrirav Lingshi Nyundev Badi Sangha Shindu Mite Biwargi Dropin Namda Shinla Chuparsho Hidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Ninyatayami Sangha Shiram Zoki Shabnam Janshu Vardu Dakni Gyapsuchi Daki Shenyem Gipe Zanam Gi Drola Vanshir Sangha Drupasho Sangha Chiram Zoki Jagnam Janshu Vardu Dakni Gapsuchi Daki Shenyem Gipe Zanam Gi Drola Vanjir Sangha Druparsho Sangha Jidam Saki Shabnam Lam Janshu Vardu Dakni Gapsuchi Daki Jenyang Gipe Zanam Gi Drola Vanjir Sangha Druparsho.
So we'll do a little bit of meditation, first a breathing meditation to shift the mind to a neutral place. Try to disengage it from all the business of the day. So check your spine to see if it's straight. Try to sit with your torso in one plane, comfortably. Breathing through your nostrils. Just be aware of the sensation of the air as it passes the tips of the nostrils, and the exhalation and the inhalation. We'll count 21 rounds, beginning with exhalation and inhalation, completing one round. Check in on your motivation for being here this evening. Check in with your heart and try to generate a feeling that you want to create happiness for yourself and those around you. And that's why we're here. Create the highest happiness, the highest goodness. Try to set an aspiration to attain complete enlightenment as quickly as possible. State of complete paradise. Make a wish in your heart or a prayer in your heart by being here this evening. I quickly move to that. You can visualize or feel or imagine the holy being that you feel closest to. Try to call them to you or reflect upon them clearly in your mind. Whatever form it may take. Try to tune into that goodness and that purity and that holiness. And from your heart, ask them to help you and bless you and guide you to achieve that same thing, that same status for yourself, that same purity and holiness. Ask them to grant you every blessing and capacity to quickly become pure of heart and mind and spirit and intention. And of course you see them happily agree. They come close and you can see them as a glowing figure of light hovering over your head happily, facing forward as a small ornament above your crown. Again, try to visualize them there as a holy being close to you. Thank you for coming. Homage to all holy beings everywhere. So tonight we're on to Buddhist ethics, as I said, Buddhist discipline, which we're going to talk about. How our ethics discipline, how is it that ethics require discipline, right? We said that this is a review class of all the material that we've taught, which is derived from the 5 great subjects taught in the Tibetan Buddhist monastery, right? So in a Tibetan monastery, they typically spend 12 years studying the perfection of wisdom, or prajnaparamita, right? Those teachings and scriptures, 4 years on middle way philosophy, and 2 years on Abhidharma, and 2 years on Vinaya. So the material we're covering this week and next week, in a couple of hours, they would spend 2 years on it. So it's a very brief summary, very high-level presentation. And then every winter for 3 months in the monastery, they would spend on logic and debate over many years, right? So, and then we add a 6th subject that we've covered here called Lamrim and Lojong, right? And typically in a Tibetan Buddhist context, Lamrim isn't part of the curriculum. They don't teach Lamrim normally in the monastery. Whenever a traveling Lama, whenever a great Lama is in town, they would normally teach Lamrim or Lojong. If His Holiness was traveling to a monastery, it would be the type of thing that they would teach. So tonight we're on to Vinaya, and normally Vinaya is not taught to people who don't have monks or nuns vows. Vinaya is in part, Vinaya is composed of many different parts. Ethics, Buddhist ethics, and discipline are composed of many different parts. A lot of it is for monks and nuns, for ordained people, but not all of it. So we're not allowed to talk. I mean, I haven't been taught the vows for ordained people because I'm not ordained, and but in general they wouldn't be passed on. I didn't receive them. So we're going to use Jason Kappa's summary of Vinaya, and because he presents a high-level overview, and he presents it in a book called The Essence of the Ocean of Vinaya. And there are hundreds of thousands of pages which are written about Buddhist ethics in Vinaya. And Jason Kappa summarizes all of it in like 4 pages. So it's very concise and very beautiful. His presentation is extraordinary, and monks and nuns have confession ceremony every 2 weeks in the Tibetan Buddhist system. So they have something called sojang, where every 2 weeks they get together as a community and they confess any non-virtues or unethical behavior to clean their mind stream and to purify that negative karma. So and so they recite that presentation in sojang. They start their confession practice by reciting his text. And so the book starts off with lines. A lot of Tibetan books are like that. They say, guess what happens if you study this book? What do you think the results are of studying this book? And so Jason Kappa's book on the the ocean of essence, of ocean of Vinaya, starts off by saying, guess what it is that if you keep it, takes you to the city of liberation. And then he says it's the essence of the Buddhist teachings. It's what we call the Vinaya, or the Praktimoksha vow. So the Sanskrit is Vinaya, Tibetan is Dhruva, and the Tibetan word is to tame. And it's the word you would use to break a horse, to tame a horse. If you had a bronco or a horse which was caught wild, it needs to be tamed, or it needs to be broken to be serviceable, to be used, and to be a proper conveyance, right? So it's the same concept here. People translate Vinaya as monks' vows or nuns' vows, but it's not really the point, because Vinaya is comprised of much more than monks' and nuns' vows. Almost half of the vows in Vinaya are for lay people. And so we'll focus on those a little bit and cover an overview of the monastic material as well. So Vinaya is translated more along the lines, Vinaya is more accurately translated along the lines of how to lead an ethical life. Right? Is Buddhist discipline, something like that. Okay. So when they use, in Tibet, when they use the term dula, to tame, like to tame a wild horse, what is it that needs to be tamed? What is it that has to be tamed to have ethics? What'd you guess?
Your mind.
Yeah, unruly impulses, right? All of our other habits, all of our impulses to hurt other people, to be self-absorbed, to be self-centered, to do whatever we, naturally, reflexively feel like doing to gratify ourselves, which might hurt someone else. So if we're going to live an ethical life, if we're going to observe ethical precepts, we have to have the capacity to observe our mind and moderate it and rein it in and be conscious about what we're doing and what we're not doing, right? So the idea here of the Tibetan term of dua, to tame a wild horse, is the same thing with the mind. The mind is unruly, it's like a wild horse. It has to be reined in, it has to be disciplined, it has to be, I won't say broken, but it has to be harnessed, right? Like a wild horse. So sometimes they also say that you are taming your attraction to the senses, right? Normally we are motivated by sensory inputs, right? I want to feel something, I want to taste something good, I want to feel something good, I want to smell something good, I want to hear something good. So we're this realm, according to Buddhism, is the desire realm, where we're primarily motivated by food and sex. And so those things tend to preoccupy the mind and fill the mind and tend to be our main motives. And so we also have to tame the senses in the way in which the senses drive our mind and cause our mind to be sort of tied up in other things which are not really conscious, if you will. So, is there anything wrong with listening to great music? No. Is there anything wrong with enjoying sense pleasures, sensual pleasures? Absolutely not. The point is to not let them dominate our mind so that we're harming other people because our mind is out of control, or harming ourselves because our mind is out of control, right? So, no problem to engage the senses and enjoy the senses, but we want to tame our mental afflictions and our attractions to the senses to the level where they are not disrupting our mind. If our senses and our desire for experiences of the senses are disrupting the mind and destabilizing the mind and causing the mind to, in essence, lose control, then we're not able to live an ethical life because we're out of control, simply said. My desire for food or my desire for touch or whatever it might be is such that I can't stop myself from doing things that perhaps I know I shouldn't be doing, or that might be hurting other people, right? So this is the idea. The idea is to take your mind from some kind of unruly state into a much more sweet, sublime state where we're able to moderate it and we're able to direct it, right? So this is a set of guidelines for people who want to control their mental afflictions and work with their mental afflictions. So the idea is if I want to discipline my mind and tame my mind so that I'm consciously directing it to behave in the way that I want it to be behaving, then this is a set of instructions as to how to do that. Right? And so this is called praktimoksha vows. The way to rein in our mental afflictions, the way to tame our mental afflictions is through what are called praktimoksha vows. And so praktimoksha is a Sanskrit word. You can call them freedom vows. So the freedom vows are the content of Vinaya. Right? So when we study, we're studying from original scriptures from the monastery. And so there are hundreds and thousands of scriptures, and they're talking about freedom vows. Right? If one wants to live according to Vinaya, then one has to learn praktimoksha vows and freedom vows. Right? The way to live an ethical life in Buddhism is to take vows and keep them. Right? Why vows? Right? We're going to talk about it. When we say the word vow, normally there are a lot of negative connotations associated with it. Particularly, I think in the West, you think of like repressed, grumpy, unhappy people who are like going like, I really want to do this, but I'm not allowed because it's against the rules, right, or something like that. And it's not the point at all. Like the translation from Tibetan English, almost don't want to use the word vow. Lord Buddha said that there are 84,000 typical mental afflictions, and there are 10 which are the most common. This is sort of top 10 list, right? He said, look, these top 10 are the most common. If you want to fix your mind, if you want to not be unhappy, if you want to not have mental afflictions, then focus on these 10 things to clean up your mind and to bring happiness to yourself, right? These are your biggest enemy. Concentrate on these 10, right? So he's basically saying, look, I'm doing you a favor. You can spend your life trying to work on countless mental afflictions and disturbing thoughts. Just focus on these 10. If you focus on these 10, you'll make great progress, right? So, it's an omniscient being. The idea, and to keep in mind that the idea of an omniscient being is someone who can see everything and knows everything. And so they're saying, look, I see it, I understand it. You do this, you'll be happy, your life will improve. Take it on, trust me, right? So it's a list of the most powerful things that you can do to improve your life and to improve your mind, basically. So, normally we spend, I don't know about you, I spend like years and years and years searching around for answers and information as to well, how will I be happier, right? What can I do to have a happier life? Should I try this or should I try that? Let me try this teaching, let me try this spiritual thing, let me try that spiritual thing, a little this, a little that. You spend a long time trying to find something that actually works and actually makes a difference, right? And so this is an enlightened being who's saying, this is the thing you need to do to be happy. Do this thing and you'll be happy, guaranteed. It's like a super karma list, right? Concentrate on these things and everything will improve. Everything in your life will improve and become extraordinary. So what's the point of studying Vinaya? What's the point of learning vows and studying vows? Jason Kappa says that you get to the city of liberation, right? And so you have to describe that process, right? How is it that taking vows, studying vows, and living according to certain vows, or ethical precepts, it's probably a better way to say it. How is it that doing that leads to a better life, right? And we've talked about it over many classes, right? This realm doesn't work properly. This is a defective realm. The human realm, according to Buddhism, there are many realms and many dimensions and many different types of beings. Beings of the human realm, we have essentially a defective realm where nothing can work out by the implicit nature of this realm. Any good thing we get, we'll lose. Everything fluctuates. There's no certainty. We're born with a body which will die. And if we're not hit by a car or if we don't get cancer, that our body will die from the inside out eventually. So
in an effort to be inconspicuous.
Yes. Yeah. So. So we live our lives as human beings thinking, if I could just find the right balance, if I could just go to the gym a little more, or eat a little more of this, or eat a little less of that, if I can just find a partner who looks a certain way or behaves a certain way, I'll be happy. If I could just find a different job, everything will be better and everything will be great and my life will improve, right? And it never works. It doesn't work. Obviously there are certain gratifications and certain satisfactions in life, and they don't last and they fluctuate. And the nature of human life is that we can never be satisfied. We don't have any lasting satisfaction. Any happiness we have, any satisfaction we have fluctuates and is fleeting. And according to Buddhism, it is just the nature of this realm. It's nothing personal. It's not because we have the wrong blend of socialization. It's not because we have the wrong amount of income. It's not because we live in the wrong city. It's not because we have the wrong job. It's because we're human beings in this realm. And if you're a human being in this realm, you'll never be satisfied, no matter how much money you get, no matter what kind of job you have. You'll be okay for a while, and then it'll change, and it'll fluctuate, and it'll turn into something else, right? So we think that if we adjust things outside of ourselves, it'll lead to happiness, right? Buddhism says you have to adjust things inside yourself to be happy. You have to make the inner adjustments required to be happy. Making the outer adjustments will never lead to happiness. It's not possible, right? So it doesn't matter how many of these courses you come to. We've done 150 classes or 170 classes or whatever it is. It doesn't matter if you do 200 classes, and you go home and you get your certificate, and then you're like, okay, well, now good things should happen to me. No, it doesn't work that way, right? Coming to these classes and hearing this material is not the answer. These are outer things. The answer is changing things on the inside of ourselves, changing inner things, changing the way in which our mind works, right? So the point of the Praktimoksha is that you have to work from the inside, and that the way you adjust things from the inside is through paying attention, through mindfulness, and through behavior modification and thought, changing the way we think and changing the way we behave, right? So that's very powerful karma. Most Buddhists have no idea what their vows are. They might take freedom vows, they might take bodhisattva vows, they might take tantric vows, might take even refuge or lifetime lay vows. And mostly people don't know what they are, and obviously can't keep the vows if they don't know what they are, right? So you have to understand them clearly. A lot of people take vows, have wrong ideas about vows, and end up thinking they're keeping the vows and they're not. They're following some precept, but it's not really what's authentically taught as a vow, right? So there's learning the vows and keeping them, and then there are exceptions to the vows. There are many sets of vows, many classes of vows, ethical precepts, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And the higher precepts trump the lower precepts, right? And it's important to know the exceptions to the vows and when to keep certain and not others, right? So we've got to think of ourselves as vow masters, as masters of vows. Someone says to you, what's your career, what's your profession, right? It's like, I'm a vow master. That's what I do. My job, my career, my profession is keeping my ethical precepts. I'm a vow master, right? It's like, if somebody says, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a stockbroker, I'm a dancer, I'm a, whatever. It's like, no. It's like, oh, I'm a vow keeper, right? That's what I do. That's my identity, because when people ask you, what do? You respond with whatever the thing which is closest to your identity system, right? I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a, whatever, right? Somebody, if you're walking down the street and somebody says, hey, vow keeper, you'd be like, oh yeah, what? That's me, right? Just like would naturally answer, right? So you turn around, right? And to be around people who don't have vows and don't know vows and don't keep vows is dangerous. It's like being around a drunk who's got a knife, like waving a knife. They're like not controlling themselves, and they're dangerous. People who don't keep their ethical precepts are dangerous. They cause a lot of harm and a lot of damage to people around them. So you don't want to be around people who are not keeping their vows, and you do want to be around people who have vows and are keeping them, right? So there's nothing in particular about studying these things which is going to be a great karma immediately. But keeping them changes everything. If you learn the vows and you keep the vows, then it changes everything. It changes the nature of our mind, and it changes reality itself. So how is it that learning vows and living according to vows makes us happy, right? perception is reality, basically. The way in which our mind functions, the way in which we perceive, the way in which we interpret, the way in which we conceive of things, is our reality. If I have a valid experience of I love that person, then I'm feeling love and I'm feeling good and happy, right? If I have a valid experience of I hate that person, then I've got a lousy reality at that moment, right? And so all the way down to the nature of subatomic particles and quantum physics and everything being a blank screen upon which we project an identity, right? So from a Buddhist perspective, as your mind changes, your reality changes. And the point of taking vows and keeping vows is to change how the mind functions, to change the subtle underpinnings of the mind, which in turn changes the nature of our perception, which in turn changes the nature of our valid reality, right? So, from a Buddhist perspective, there are multiple realms here in this room right now, and we can perceive, two of them, human and animal realms, and there are many other realms here now that we cannot perceive, right? But as we clean our mind and develop a more subtle mind and develop a more pure mind, that mind has a capacity to perceive more and more deeply, broadly, right? And so it's like moving up the spiritual ladder, if you will, or chain. As the mind becomes more pure and more clean and more holy, its capacity increases and its ability to perceive these things increases. And so you start to see a different reality, right? I mean, you actually perceive other levels of reality and other types of beings, holy beings, whatever the case might be, right? So, and people who don't keep vows and don't keep an ethical life, you can talk to them about the importance of virtue, you can talk to them about the importance of ethic, and they'll be like, yeah, did you see that movie last night? It doesn't matter how much you try. You can just be like, wow, this is amazing. Like, can you believe this wonderful, beautiful, kind thing that this person did in this, holy activity? And you'd be like, yeah, but Minecraft is really awesome, And it just doesn't. It's just not. Doesn't register. It's not important, right? So they don't even have the karma to hear about it. And I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, you have to have even enough virtue or good karma that you've collected to even be able to care about ethics or vows or being a good person, right? So, and if you do, then then you're on your way to liberation. If you don't, then you'll never make progress, obviously. So, all the invisible worlds that coexist in this room, if we're not keeping vows, we'll never perceive them and we'll never know about them, right? So, if we want to get to higher vows, the Bodhisattva vows and Tantric vows, then we have to have these Praktimoksha vows, these freedom vows. And you have to basically be keeping the 10 non-virtues. At a basic level, it's observing, it's avoiding 10 non-virtues. It's observing ethics at that basic level, right? So, so if we're keeping the 10 non-virtues, it's possible to take higher vows. It's better if you take lifetime lay vows, which are what? It means for the rest of this life, it means not killing, right? Human, right? It means not stealing someone else's partner, right? No lying about your spiritual attainments, and no alcohol or intoxicants, right? So,
and not taking anything, not stealing.
Not stealing anything of value. So there are 5. Yeah, thank you. I missed them. You got your card. Good for you. So, and people say, well, I don't do those things anyway. I have no interest in stealing someone else's partner. I have no interest in killing, another human being, right? I mean, I wouldn't do that. So what does it matter, right? Why do I need a vow? What does it matter? It's a totally different thing to take a vow and pay attention versus do something because it's an established habit. Why is anything an established habit? From the past. We create all of our habits, right? Things don't just pop up from nowhere, right? So, the you that was there in your past lives, worked hard to create these habits. You know, as a friend of mine used to say, you can thank Susie, you can thank Joe, right? It's like, who's Susie? It's like you in your last life, you know. So thank Susie, okay, and thank Joe, because they worked really hard for you to get where you are right now, and you know they worked really hard so that you would be where you are, so you would naturally feel like, I don't want to kill anything. It's not natural. It's the result of lifetimes of effort, vast amounts of work to create this habituation and predisposition and inclination to be a good person. And it didn't come from nowhere, and it won't last forever, right? It's there because it was caused. If we want to continue to be a person who is not attracted to killing or stealing and the rest, right? Then we have to make an effort now to perpetuate that behavior. It doesn't just happen automatically. And so the action of taking a vow and resolving and committing to being that kind of person, and then the follow-on behavior of, I'm going to actually pay attention to make sure I do it for the rest of my life, sets us up for the future, sets us up for future lives, right? So, and then paying attention to those vows. It's not just, I'm not going to kill another human. I mean, look, you know, when are you going to have a chance to kill another human, right? How often does the opportunity arise? Not very much, not very often. So then it turns into paying attention to very subtle aspects of those vows. You know, there's something on the floor that someone could slip on. Let me take care of that so no one gets hurt. You know, and then being mindful in a more and more subtle fashion like that, along the lines of those vows, leads the mind to really change and leads one's reality to really change. It has a dramatic impact upon how we think and how we live and what we experience, right? So, you know, there's an extraordinary effect. So why do they call them prakti moksha, right? Prakti, by the way, means individual, and moksha means freedom, Sanskrit, right? So, you know, freedom, what individual freedom, what are they saying here? These are individual freedom vows. What do they mean? Wow.
That to practice them gives us freedom.
Yeah, they lead to freedom, and they're individual in that it's just you. You know, it's just, if you do it, you get it. You get a result. If you individually take these vows and follow them, you will attain freedom. And if you don't, then you won't, right? So it's an individual matter, really is the point, right? So when you take vows, right? When you take ethical precepts, when you commit and swear to being a good person, right? Something happens on a subtle, invisible, energetic level. This beautiful energy grows in the mind and the body and stays there until the day you die. So in the case of prakti moksha vows, when you take these freedom vows, they're lifetime vows. They last until you die, and then when you die, then they're lost, right? Bodhisattva vows go from life to life. You retain them into your next lives, right? So, but if you don't have the right motivation, when you take the vows, they never form. And this doesn't happen. So you can sit through a 3-hour ceremony for vows. You can repeat all of the refrains. You know, you can answer with the right statement everywhere along the way. You know, you can get bumped on the head at the right place. But if you don't have the right motivation in your mind, then you don't get the vows. They don't form in your mind stream. And that energy doesn't form in the mind and the body. And it's not like you have to have this pure thought for 3 hours. You know, it's not like your mind has to be in some pure state for 3 hours. It's like the text says, it's like 30 seconds, a couple of minutes. For some period of time, it's necessary to have the right attitude and the right motivation for the vows to actually form in the mind stream and to be planted in the mind stream. And it's basically, I'm fed up with this broken realm. I'm fed up with this suffering realm, and I want to get out of this broken suffering realm. That has to be the motivation that's in one's mind somewhere along the way during the vow ceremony. For a modest period of time. You know, I understand I have to take vows for this to happen. I understand that the only way to get out of the broken realm is to lead an ethical life, right? Is to be a virtuous person, right? So I mean, in the monastery, there's a Tibetan saying for a fully ordained monk who doesn't have any vows, right? It's possible for someone to be ordained, go through their whole life wearing robes, and not have the vows, because during the ceremony, they weren't thinking along the lines of this. They didn't have renunciation. They weren't thinking, I'm doing this to put an end to suffering and to get out of this defective realm, this limited suffering realm, right? So it's quite possible to be an ordained person your entire life and not even have vows formed in your mind stream, to not actually be carrying the vows, right? So you have to be thinking that this realm doesn't work. The only thing I have to look forward to is getting old, getting wrinkly, losing my mind, losing my body, losing everything that I've worked so hard to get, right? And eventually, becoming senile and losing my identity, my mind, right? And if we truly understand that an ethical way of life leads to our own happiness, then you want vows. We want to live an ethical life. The notion of some kind of repressive, unpleasant thing which is imposed upon us comes from thinking that vows limit us and restrict us and hold us back and hold us down and keep us from happiness and keep us from good things we want, basically, right? When in fact, vows are designed by an omniscient being to say, if you do these things, you will be happy. It will create inner happiness. It will create a mind and a body and a world and a reality and a realm for you where you're happy all the time, where you can be in paradise. And it's the only way to attain that, and it's the only way to achieve that, right? Okay. So that's the idea. So that's a sort of a long-winded explanation of vows, right, at the top level. Now, Jason Kappa goes through his book in his text, and he has 6 categories that he goes through to study Vinaya. So the first part we talked about, which is what's the Praktimoksha vow, right? So Praktimoksha vow is what? He answers it in his text. He says, the day you decide, as a spiritual practice, that to get out of this broken realm you will never hurt another living creature, you're fulfilling the essence of Vinaya, the essence of Praktimoksha, right? So it's a decision in one's mind, where one says, I'm not going to hurt any of the living beings. I refuse to hurt any of the living beings, right? And that decision in one's mind is the essence of taking the vow, is the essence of feeling like I want to be an ethical person and I want to live an ethical life, right? So Bodhisattva vows are different. They're more like, I'm going to actually do something, right? Praktimoksha vows are simply making a decision. Praktimoksha vows are simply, I want to get out of this broken realm, and I've just resolved and I've decided in my mind I'm not going to hurt anyone so that I can accomplish that, right? So the emphasis is to advance myself spiritually. I won't hurt any other living beings, okay? And that's reflected in the 10 non-virtues, right? So the 10 non-virtues are all about not hurting other living beings, right? I mean, not all of them, right? 7 of them, I mean the first 7, right? I mean, we have those of body and speech, right? So 3 physical, 4 verbal, right? Killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, hurting someone physically, right? And then verbally, right? Lying, slander, idle talk, harsh words, right? And so then what about the other 3? That's 7 of the 10. Jason Kappa says, no, you have to give up the 3 that motivate those 7. You have to give up the mental non-virtues that motivate the actual harming of people externally, right? So these are the inner motivators that hurt people externally. Craving, ill will, and wrong view. Craving is basically being happy when other people don't have what they want, right? It's it's this feeling of Hector has a nice coat, and I don't, and I feel jealous, or something like that. And so Shakyamuni Buddha said, this is among the top 10 of 84,000 mental afflictions. So it's not like we only think this once a week. According to Lord Buddha, this is something that's going through our mind pretty continuously, pretty regularly. So if we start to pay attention, if we have awareness, we start to notice that we're unhappy when other people are successful, when other people get ahead. Oh, they're beautiful, they have that nice outfit, I don't, I wish I did, I feel unhappy, I feel down that they have it and I don't, right? They've got a nice car, driving over, it's like, oh, they got some Porsche Cayenne, they've got a Porsche Cayenne and I don't, And so there's this constant story going through the mind. They have it and I don't, and I'm in some subtle way upset or disappointed or feeling down. Certainly not feeling happy, right? It's not like, oh, they have a Porsche Cayenne. How wonderful for them, right? It's not like, oh, they've got a new, sports, whatever. I could go on and on, but how wonderful for them. It's not the normal thought that occurs to the mind, is it? Right? The mind is normally like down when it sees other people having things. Oh, wow, all these people are making all this money in the market, I'm not. Right? Oh, it's not like, how wonderful they're making all this money in the market, right? So, it's this way that the mind functions, sort of habitually, to be down when others are succeeding and have something that we don't, right? So, and then the converse, number 9, is to be happy when other things are going badly for other people. And, it's like, oh, those guys at Goldman Sachs finally got their comeuppance, about time, right? All those bankers, they finally got put in jail. That's good news, right? So, and, or whatever it might be, right? So we have these constant thoughts, taking little pleasures from other people's problems, and then the biggest one is wrong view, right? Which is around what causes the world, right? Where do things come from in this world? What causes things, right? Good karma, virtue. Nothing else matters. Nothing else causes anything except karma, and it's very hard to live that way. It's very hard to live along the lines and say, I'm just going to pay attention to karma, and pay attention collecting the right karma all the time, and disregard all the conventional apparent causes of everything, right? Very difficult. So, it doesn't matter how smart you are, the only reason anything ever happens is karma. All right? So, okay, so Tsongkhapa has 6 sort of categories in his book, his Epistle on Ethics. He has 6 categories where he explains the individual freedom vows, right? So the first is their basic nature, which we just talked about. What are Prakti-moksha vows? What is Vinaya, right? It's the feeling, it's the motivation, it's the resolution. The heart of Prakti-moksha and the heart of Vinaya is, I'm not going to hurt anyone else ever again in this life to end my suffering and to get out of here and to attain freedom, right? So that's the first section of his book. And then he goes into how they're divided up into different categories. And he divides the vows, ethical precepts, into 8 different types, 8 different categories, right? So there's a one-day vow. And this is a Hinayana vow, actually. It's in the text. It's a one-day Hinayana vow that virtually no one keeps anymore. Now a one-day Mahayana vow is kept, but this is referring to the one-day Hinayana vow. Then there's lifetime layman's vows, which has 5 parts, which we mentioned, right? And then people ask, well, can I take 2 of the 5 for a lifetime layperson vows? Can I just do no killing and no lying? Or whatever. And the texts are pretty clear. The commentators say, no, you should take them all. It's not you take 4 of the 5, or 3 of the 5, or 1 of the 5. You take them all, right? So, some lamas say, well, you can skip the one on alcohol, or you can skip whichever one you like. And Utradhamma Bhadra says, forget it. Why? Buddhists can't drink alcohol anyway. If you're a Buddhist, Lord Buddha said that. Whoever drinks the amount of alcohol or serves the amount of alcohol you can put on the tip of a blade of grass isn't a Buddhist, right? It says in the sutra. So, And the commentators say it also applies to other stuff, other intoxicants, right? So, all right. So, number 4 and 5, the fourth and fifth types of vows are monks and nuns, are novice monks and nuns vows, right? And there are 36 different vows that novice monks and nuns have that they keep for the rest of their life. There's a special category for women because they misbehave more, called intermediate nuns vows. Sorry, okay, take it back. And then there are fully ordained monks and nuns. And so they're separating male and female. So that's 8. So
Do we have any addresses on those women who misbehave? Probably
yes. All right. And they have Rapchung vows. Ordained people have Rapchung vows, which are not actually considered vows. They're not Praktimoksha vows. It means the person who's left the home life. It's a commitment to leave the home life. And in the monastic system, you have to be 20 to take ordination vows. So all the little guys with robes that are running around, they have their Rapchung. They have a commitment. They don't have real vows. They're not old enough to make the decision yet. When they're 20, they can decide to take ordination, right? Okay. So then next he goes into in the fourth section of the book. He goes into who can take vows, who's eligible to take vows. And Jisoo Kappa basically discusses the personality traits of people who can take vows. What kind of being can take vows, and basic things about your being that have to be in place for vows to stick in your mind stream and to be able to take and keep vows. So you have to have a human body. Beings of other realms doesn't really work. And then you have to have male or female energy. You have to have a certain kind of energy. And it's talked about as kind of the essence of manhood or womanhood. There's an energy in your mind and body. It's described in the second chapter of the Abhidhammakosha that gives you a sense of resolve. It sort of provides a sense of the ability to make some kind of resolve or firm commitment. There's some kind of decisive energy as male or female. They say in other realms people don't have enough suffering to think that they should get out of the place. So if you're in a higher realm, there's no real incentive to want to get out, to work to end suffering. And if you're in a lower realm, there's too much suffering to be able to work to get out of suffering. So our realm has enough beauty where we're inspired to pursuit of complete beauty. We see beautiful flowers and beautiful sunsets and beautiful things, and we think, I understand beauty and I want beauty, and then we see horrible sufferings of this realm. And there's enough horrible suffering to feel, I want to get out of that horrible suffering. So we have the right mix of the two things to feel like, I see the problems and I see the suffering, I want to get out of it, and I see the good stuff and I want to get it. Right? So like that. So you have to have the ability to be resolved. You have to have the ability to keep the vow, take it, keep it, right? And so then next he talks about how do you lose the vows. What does one do to lose these praktimoksha vows? Right? And there are two ways you can lose praktimoksha vows. You lose them when you die, which is, happens to everyone, right? They're for this lifetime only. And you can give them back formally in a ceremony. You can actually go to the abbot and say, do the ceremony and say, I hereby give these vows back. Okay. And then there are special ways to lose the vows. And when they say special, they just mean specific to a certain vow. They relate to a specific sort of vow. For example, one-day vows. You take one-day vows and you lose them when the next morning during the dawn it's light enough that you can see the light in your palms. So those are other ways that you lose your vows.
Would somebody take a ceremony to give vows back, for instance, if they were ordained and then they want to become married?
They could just randomly break them and not care, and that'd be, and not formally get them back. But in the idea to do it properly would be, yes, you would say, I'm giving my vows back. You would go to your preceptor or to someone who's qualified to do it with, and you would say, I'd like to not have these vows anymore. So if you think about ordained people, hundreds of people have been ordained in the West, and a large majority of them have given their vows back, or not kept their ordination, or not kept their vows. It's generally considered to be, how do you say it? One needs to have their vows for 10 years, the ordination vows for 10 years for it to be considered stable. You're not considered to be stable unless you've had your ordination for 10 years and have kept it for 10 years. And then after 10 years, you're considered to be stable. So, and you see it, a lot of people fall and give back their robes before, after a couple of years, whatever the case may be, right? So, nice to see you, dear. Okay. So then the sixth portion of his book, he covers the benefits of keeping the vows, right? Which is basically you get to nirvana, right? I mean, life becomes better and better and better. Life becomes happier, more satisfying, sweeter and sweeter as you get older. And so if we're getting into the grumpy, repressed, you call it uptight mode, shall we say, around vows, then something's gone wrong. The idea of vows is that they are the karmic source of increased happiness. And if we're living life in a way where we feel like my vows are holding me down, feel restricted and repressed by my vows, then certainly the essence of the Vinaya is missing, which is, I'm following these vows to collect the right karma, to put an end to my suffering, right? That these vows are describing how to live a virtuous life and an ethical life so that I can collect the causes to be happier and happier and happier. So there's some crossed wire somewhere. There's something wrong somewhere if I have vows, or if a person has vows and they're feeling worse and worse about it. Something's not right somewhere along the way, right? They don't know them, they're not keeping them, etc. Right? I mean, it should be that our level of happiness is increasing. It's like, I'd like some more vows, please. Things are going pretty well, and I'm feeling pretty good, and life is looking pretty sweet. And I'd like Bodhisattva vows now, please. I'd like Tantric vows now, please. I'd like to do higher and higher, sweeter and sweeter things. So keeping them. If we've taken vows and if we're keeping them, our mind should be improving, right? I remember when my wife took vows many years ago, and she was very unhappy. She was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did this. I'm gonna burn in hell. I'm gonna have so many hell realm rebirths." And she was tortured and tortured and tortured. She finally went and saw, and he was like, "Oh, Joanne, you're like Alice in Wonderland, He said, "Look at your mind. How is your mind now? How was it a year ago? Do you see any difference in your mind? Yeah. It's like that, We all want a quick fix. We all want a result immediately upon doing something. It's like, I was good today. I want to have a nice night. I was good today. I want a lot of money tomorrow, right? I was good today. I want the perfect whatever tomorrow. We all want the quick hit, and it doesn't work that way. It's like it's a long-term proposition. In my experience, it's a long-term proposition where we're working hard to change deeply ingrained behaviors and habits to be someone who we want to be, with a deep understanding that will be a happier person. That I will have a happier mind and a purer mind and a clearer mind and a better world and a better reality and a better disposition. And I can look back to think, what was I like 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, right? It's like, no question, I'm a happier person than I was, 20 years ago. No question that I've got a lot more peace than I had 20 years ago. I mean, I'm not done, sadly. However, there is this direct correlation between effort put in and results gotten out, sadly, for me. So I haven't put as much effort in as I would like to, right? But, and I think we all have to check in like that with ourselves, not like, did I get gratified 3 hours after I was a good boy or girl, But, what's my mind like now relative to what it was 1 or 5 or 10 years ago, based upon this path, this practice? Am I more peaceful? Am I happier? Do I feel better about myself? Do I, what's my life? What's my inner life like? And how do I relate to my outer world, right? Is it better than it was? On however many different levels, on all levels, right? So there's a big difference between taking vows and keeping them and just naturally being a good person because you're that kind of person, right? I mean, just naturally being a good person wears off. It's caused, and when the causes, we created the causes in our past lives to be a virtuous person. And if we're not asserting effort now to be a more virtuous person, then that karma will wear out, and new karmas will assert themselves, right? So it's like fighting the fight to the very end, right? It's like I can't let up until I've gotten the goal. It's like I can't be a good person one day and then not pay attention the next day. I mean, I can, but it's not very productive, right? I mean, from the perspective of making meaningful spiritual progress, it's like I have to be paying attention. I have to be making effort consistently, regularly, as continuously as possible. Because if I'm not, other habits will assert themselves, and I'll become a different kind of person than the person that I want to be, right? So it's like that, right? So. Take some vows, Take some vows and then keep them.
Will you be giving any vows?
I haven't planned to, but I suppose it could be arranged. What kind of vows? We just
Bodhisattva vows.
Bodhisattva vows. What course are you on, Hector?
I'm just finishing ACI 11, which is
past
past the vows.
Past the Bodhisattva vows, man. Golly. So the other thing to say about vows is that you really should understand them. Never take a vow without knowing it, to the extent possible. I mean, if you're going to get ordained, you're not going to know the vows necessarily in advance. Higher vows, tantric vows, you don't know them in advance. Bodhisattva vows, you do know in advance. Obviously, praktimoksha vows, one-day vows, you know in advance, right? So never take a vow without knowing it. Why?
It seems kind of hollow.
You'll break them. I mean, you can take vows and you don't know them, you just go out and break them 10 minutes later, right? What's the point, right? So it's extremely important to study the vows before you take them. So you have to have refuge vows before you take praktimoksha vows, and then for bodhisattva vows, you have to have refuge before bodhisattva vows, right? So first study bodhisattva vows. You want to take bodhisattva vows. Finish the course. If you finish the course. Have you finished the course? So finish the bodhisattva vow course. Make sure you learn the vows. So here's the thing, okay? It's easy to say, take vows, okay? And it's, can be easy to take vows. I mean, sometimes you can't find anyone to give them, but, if one takes vows, it's an hour. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, depending on the ceremony. It isn't very time-extensive commitment, right? But it's what you do after that matters, right? And then that's lifelong. It's a lifelong process. So it's extremely important that one is intimately familiar with the vows, because you're committing to spend the rest of your life doing that. So you got to really look closely at it and say, is this really what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life as a priority? And it's important to be very clear on that, because it's kind of as you say, it's hollow, it's lip service. It's worse than wasted effort in that it's a missed spiritual opportunity. These are precious spiritual opportunities, and it's important to be prepared and to go into it to maximize and optimize the result and the benefit. I mean, as I was saying earlier, you can go into a vow ceremony, and if you don't have the thought in your mind, I'm here taking these vows because I want to get out of this broken realm, and leading an ethical life is the way to do that. If you don't have that thought in your mind, the seeds aren't planted in the mind stream, and one doesn't get the vows. So very important to just be very familiar and very comfortable and very well exposed to the material, because it's a multi-lifetime vow for Bodhisattva vows. And being clear that that's what I want to do. So and we can say, yeah, I aspire to help everyone my whole life long. I'm going to live to help my life is going to be geared towards helping every living being, right? Okay, but what are the vows? What does that specifically translate to? What are you supposed to be doing and not doing, Because it's not an abstraction. There are 64 specific do's and don'ts which expand upon the 6 perfections wrapped up in those bodhisattva vows. So it's like, do I understand the 6 perfections, and do I want to live according to the 6 perfections? And do I want to live the 6 perfections according to these instructions? See what I mean? Something like that. But I'm in no way discouraging. I think it's wonderful. I think it's beautiful. And I think you should definitely do it. But first, finish the course. Okay. So I'm going to finish early this evening. I think there's 1 or 2 more things to cover. Because I have to get children home to bed. So just to talk a little bit more about monks and nuns, they say, what do most of us know about monks and nuns vows, right? Not much. It's like, well, let's see, if you're ordained, you have to cut your hair. It's one thing I know.
Something about keeping the robes in a specific way.
Yeah, you gotta wear robes, you have to wear them some certain way.
Yeah.
And you gotta be celibate in most traditions, right? That's about all most people know about ordination, right? It's about the long and the short of it, right? Which is not too much. So there's a lot more to it than that. But the Vinaya is what being a monk or nun is about. The essence of Vinaya is not hurting others, right? Is resolving not to hurt others with your life. So maybe 50% of the Vinaya as it relates to monks and nuns is related to not owning stuff, right? Why, right? These vows came about from Lord Buddha in his day. He was a charismatic, holy teacher that people were attracted to. And so what happens when you have a charismatic holy teacher that people are attracted to? Oh, we saw it here with Holy Geshe Michael, right? People start following you around. First you have 5 people following you around, then you have 10 people following you around, then you have 15 people following you around. And in Lord Buddha's day, it was like he had like 2,500 people for the Dhammapada Sutra following him around. He was teaching that. And so then it becomes an issue, right? What do you do when you got people following you around who are just like a crowd in mass? And so a lot of the Vinaya evolved because of that. It's like they needed rules because you have all these people who want to be good people, and yet when you put crowds of people together, stuff happens, right? So in the old days of ancient India, he said, look, we need some basic rules, right? Because people are breaking the dishes and trampling the fences and ruining the lawn of whomever we're going to visit, and it's not cool, right? So this is how how the monks and nuns rules came about. Like some guy got caught peeing in the river, ruining the water supply. So they made a rule about that. So it became inconvenient to have gatherings of people traveling around together because of the impact and the ramification of that in a practical sense. So in the Vinaya, there's this thing called the incident. Every vow from the Vinaya has an incident associated with it. So first there's the incident, and then there's the rule that comes out of the incident, right? So that's how a lot of the monks and nuns rules came about, right? So, there's this group of people trying to study and devote themselves to practice full time and live in harmony and function as a group, but then stuff still happens, right? So a lot of the commitments of monks and nuns are around not owning stuff and not having anything. Like monks and nuns are not allowed to touch money. They're not allowed to own anything. Not allowed to prepare food for themselves. Not allowed to cook, right? The idea is that it gives them greater freedom. It frees up their time, it frees up their mind, it frees up their capacity for spiritual things, right? So that they can focus on getting enlightened quickly. So the question arises in our day, are we supposed to stick to the literal meaning of the vow? Or are we supposed to stick to the intention of the vow? Like in the Buddhist day, they had meditation mats, right? And they had monsoon season. And so, you gotta air the mats out. So, they air the mats out, and then it's supposed to rain, and somebody's supposed to be washing the mats so that they don't get drenched in the monsoon. And they didn't wash the mats. And they got drenched in the monsoon. So guess what? They made a rule. There's a Vinaya rule that you can't be more than, I don't know what it is, 50 feet, I don't know what it is. You're not allowed to be more than 50 feet from the mats if you've been assigned to watch them, So, do we have mats and do we have monsoon? No. It's still one of the rules.
We had
So it's important to take the spirit and not the letter of a thing, right? Especially in our culture, in our day and age, right? So, in our culture, in our society, I think Dharma is mainly being taught by lay people. It's being taught as much certainly by lay people as it is by ordained people. And chances are likely as not that Dharma will spread here through non-ordained people. So we need to be able to consider ourselves part of the Vinaya, right? If we say Vinaya is for ordained Sangha, then there's a disconnect, because the essence of Vinaya is the resolve not to hurt other people throughout your life, right? And 3 of the 8 sets of vows apply to lay people, right? So it's important that as lay people and as lay teachers, we consider ourselves part of the Vinaya system, right? It applies to us as much as it does to ordained people, right? So it's important to take some kind of lay people's vows and keep them, right? And know what the vows are and know how to keep them. Then our reality changes, right? So one thing I was looking for this quote here. It's the last page of the Vinaya Sutra. It says, in future days, apply these rules with intelligence to your modern situation that you have there. Lord Buddha gives an admonition that says, don't ever forget in the future generations the intent of the Vinaya, right? It's not about mats in the monsoon, right? The intent of the Vinaya is to live a life where we're not harming other people. That's the essence of Prakti-moksha-vasa, that's the essence of Vinaya. It's a system so that Dharma brothers and sisters can work together, live together, practice together, study together, and deal with each other and their sponsors in a harmonious way, right? So that everyone can get enlightened quickly. And so, there's the basic idea to have some kind of purity and happiness together, right? So, one last example I think I would mention is that, Lord Buddha, when he had his disciples with him, and he was talking about, he said it was about not owning things, right? It was a little bit radical, really. He's saying that, I don't want you all to wear these clothes anymore. And they said, well, what are we supposed to wear? He said, go in the garbage and pick up scraps of rags and wear that. So so they went and they gathered scraps of rags from the garbage and they sewed them together into a patch cloth, and that's what they wrapped around themselves and wore as their robes, right? And so those were the first robes of the Sangha, were just patch cloth. And so now, what happens? In the Indian village or wherever the robes are being made, they go to a tailor, they buy 12 feet of cloth, they have them cut it up into patches, and they have them sew it back together. Right? Because that's what it says in the Vinaya. Right? So you wear a patch cloth robe. So, the point here is, it was a rule to sew patches together to make a robe. Right? But the point here is that it's easy for things to get a bit confused. Right? Especially as times change and these things go to other cultures. In our culture, in our era, in our society, it's important that the real intent is kept and that this is a holy, sacred, relevant thing to us in our lives, right? And not some kind of, and something that people will want to do because they see its importance and they see its value and they see its meaning, and not some kind of empty system of rules which don't make any sense for our culture and our society. And so it's important to approach the Vinaya in the way that Lord Buddha admonished in the last lines of the Vinaya Sutra. Is stick to the intent and not to the letter of the law, as it were, right? Because if the letter of the law said someone whipped the elephant and hurt it, who cares? We don't have elephants, we're going to focus our day on not carrying a whip a certain way so that we don't hurt elephants that we don't have. It just doesn't make any sense. So please take that with you when you're thinking about Vinaya and rules and ethics and the rest. It has to be something which makes sense. It has to be something which resonates in our minds according to the heart essence of the Praktimosha and Vinaya, which is, I resolve to live my life in a way where I'm not going to hurt any living beings. Nothing like that. Right? All right, thank you.
Sajiv Bhukir Jishin Metotram Riral Njir Nyundev Impadi Sangha Shindu Nitevargi Edrohin Namda Shinla Chuparsho Idam Guru Ratnamandalakam Ninyatayami Gawadi Gawakun Sunam Yashe Zokzokshin Sunam Yashe Legend Hui Dampa Kuni Adopa Show.
The power of the blessings, His holy teachings, by the power of the Vinaya, by the power of our holy intent to end all suffering everywhere quickly in this life, may we quickly attain every realization and full enlightenment. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me speak about these holy things, and it's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you for teaching about these holy things.
So we can get the kiddies to bed, not too late.
There are kitties, they're napping in the shelves.
He's got a box.
Was it your bunk beds?
That's it.